Welcome to Love Journalism.
Thanks for having me.
So your book has this line, and I love it, and we're going to jump right in with this. When people leave jobs, we don't talk enough about the corresponding loss of community, especially if the departure is sudden. The Integrity Institute, something you're building, would provide a place where community just doesn't vanish because you're badged in. Start there. What is the Integrity Institute, and what are you trying to build?
So, the Integrity Institute is something that some of my former Facebook colleagues created after the Civic Integrity team was disbanded in November of 2020, right after the election. And are you able to hear me? Okay. Okay.
Absolutely. Yeah.
All right, great. Just wanted to make sure. So a lot of people might remember Frances Haugen. We might talk about that. She was the whistleblower in fall of 21. She was part of that civic integrity team too. But so that team, this is the middle of COVID, so we're all working remotely. All of a sudden, this team is disbanded. And for about 3-4 years, we had been working nonstop to try to build the tools and everything we needed to protect the integrity of elections on Facebook after everything that had happened in 2016. And so, but like just because Facebook didn't want to do that work anymore or didn't want to have that team, these people still wanted a way to share resources, talk to one another. There were similar teams doing stuff at Twitter and Google, and this isn't really a topic that's competitive in a way. And so the Integrity Institute was really a way to do two things. One, for people in trust and safety to share, not just on elections, but all sorts of trust and safety issues, to share resources, but also the outside world, policymakers, think tanks, reporters like yourself, et cetera. The companies were a black box. They had no idea how some of this stuff worked. So the thought was, okay, with the Integrity Institute, maybe we can help regulators better understand how all this stuff works, the trade-offs for doing, et cetera, in a hopes that maybe it can lead to better regulation. So the Integrity Institute is meant to be a way to not only provide that community, but also to help the external world better understand how all this stuff works.
Hmm. You open your book with a dedication to the ones in the arena. Explain to us, why are you doing that? What's your focus there on the people who are actually down there in the weeds right now?
Yeah. So the ones in the arena refers to a speech that Teddy Roosevelt gave. I can't remember exactly where, but it basically talks about how it's not necessarily the critic that counts, but it's the person that's willing to be in the arena every single day, doing the hard work, getting a dirty face, all those types of things. And part of the reason I wanted to write this book, not only just to tell my story and me to have ownership and control over that, but to also tell the story of these people who, like, we talk so much about what decisions Mark Zuckerberg makes, what Elon Musk does, et cetera. And there are people that day in, day out are doing this really tough work inside the companies, trying to get more resources from leadership, trying to debate all these problems. And I wanted them, when they read this book, to not feel so alone, to see themselves as well in this, because I think that especially if you're at a smaller company, it can be very lonely. You can be like, does everybody else have this figured out? Like, am I the only one that doesn't know what the heck this is doing? I don't know who I should go talk to about this. Like, this is really hard. Is it just I can't hack it? Like, I'm not good enough. And I wanted people to be like, no, this is just really hard. And you're not alone, and there is a bigger community. And also that this work still matters, even if there are people externally that say it doesn't.
Hmm. So talk about your audience, because you've got a book, you have a Substack. Who is reading you right now? Explain sort of to my listeners, as I've asked other guests as well. Give my listeners a sense of who your audience is.
Yeah, my audience is really a spectrum of different folks. We'll start with the politics side first. So there's campaign professionals, there's policymakers, there's staffers on the Hill, there's public affairs professionals, there's think tank people that focus on tech policy, et cetera, just want to know more about how AI is working. Then on the tech side, we've got tech executives in the public policy space, in the trust and safety space. You've got journalists, again, such as yourself, a lot of media, and it's also all around the country. So, or not all around the world, excuse me. So like, I think I'm like in over 130 countries. Like India is a really big subscriber. Europe is, Brazil, like, because of the global nature of what I write about, and I try to make sure the focus on the globe as well. Those tend to be people. And then I love like friends of my parents back home who just kind of love to be like, what's Katie up to? And finds this stuff fascinating.
It's like a miniature version of Facebook in 2026, is it not?
Yeah. Well, and I really like, because the other thing too is like it's very ideological spectrum as well. Like I've got Democrats, I got Republicans, I've got all sorts of different folks. And that is how my Facebook feed is too. Cause over the years, I've got, my parents at home are Republicans. I've got Democrats that I'm really good friends with. Like, so my feed, I always say, like, I never really had much, I'm sure I have some filter bubbles, but like I get the extremes when stuff happens in politics. I'm seeing everyone's opinion about it.
Who from your high school do you want to call out right now to say, please stop posting those political texts?
I'm not falling for that one.
All right. That was my first attempt at making news here in Green Bay, Wisconsin. All right, Katie, I want you to back up and talk to us about the Republican National Committee years, working in the Republican ranks during this would be George W. Bush's reelection.
Yep.
I'm a couple years into my own Washington journalism career, and it's just fascinating. You're in the digital shop when there's really no digital shop. Barney Cam is the thing. Everyone's loving that there's pictures or video of the president's dog snooping around. What do you learn from Mindy Finn, someone who would end up becoming a vice presidential nominee, and Mike Turk during those Bush RNC years about
Yeah.
specifically not overproducing? I think is maybe the thing that I found
Yeah.
most fascinating.
Yeah. So first, I want to put us all in context of what the world was like in 2004, 2005. We don't have iPhones. We have Blackberries or Good Links. I had Good Links. Remember that was the Al Gore, I
Yep.
think,
Rick
device
Selfie.
that we had. Uh, Facebook is a year old.
Mhm.
YouTube is just being created. MySpace is still a big thing. We don't have Twitter. We don't have Instagram.
Is
Yeah.
that what
Is that a CD player?
the CD player? Yeah, my Walkman.
Yep. Yep. We're still burning CDs. So, and you like you digital cameras, right? Like you don't have so those early days. So one of the most fun things we did, and it was pre-YouTube days. So the videos are still in the basement of the RNC, but they're not on YouTube. Is Mindy and I decided to do an internet show called Off the Record with Mindy and Katie. And we interviewed Senator John Thune for our first one. We interviewed like Ari Fleischer, like all these folks. And the thought was the internet is not meant to be this overly scripted, fancy studio type of thing. Let's have these two young 20 somethings interview and not overproduce it. Right. And we were bad. Like we were not very good at first because I wasn't even a broadcast journalism major. I was a print journalism major around all of it. But like it was so popular. People loved it. So much so that Mark Halperin and the ABC Note guys at the time had a headline at one point in time about what do Mindy and Katie think of Iran's nuclear capability.
What did you
We
think?
thought that we thought that was amazing. RNC Comms did not.
Of course not.
And so that was kind of the end of that. But like, I really think if we could have kept that going, we would have kept getting a little bit better at it. But it was something that made politics more accessible, I think, for folks and was a little bit more fun than just, watching like what was happening on cable news and
Mhm.
stuff like that. But the RNC saw it as us being made fun of, which we were for sure. But they then decided they wanted something a little bit more slicker.
Mm.
And we got canceled and replaced. And then that show that they replaced us with, I don't know, I don't remember how many episodes it did, but it tanked. It didn't do very well because now it was like this is like I'm watching the evening news. It's not anything special.
Alternative reality, if you're not canceled, which again, I think you're describing suits at the RNC or like looking at this going, oh God, what are we doing? But if you hadn't been canceled, you guys might have probably gotten John McCain elected or some other Republican elected in 2008 instead of Barack Obama, right?
It's possible. Like it's possible. Like the Republicans coming out of 2004, remember, were seen as more digitally savvy because of the micro targeting and everything that was happening. And that was micro targeting happening offline, let alone online. But there was a lot of stuff we were doing that the Kerry campaign was not doing during all of that and really spurred We have to remember Obama was not considered the runner for 2008. And so by being the underdog, they were really able to experiment a lot more with digital in a way that I think, you didn't see from Hillary Clinton. And then I was on the Giuliani campaign and they were a front runner in the lead up to all of that. And so, yeah, it's hard to know like what could have happened if we would have been able to show the success of that and then what somebody like a McCain or other presidential contenders might have done.
You introduced Rudy Giuliani. I'm going to go there only. In the first question is, how many times has Rudy Giuliani butt dialed you? Is my most important question. Has he ever butt dialed you?
No, so I only met him once. Like I was a lowly digital staffer. I wasn't on the campaign trail with him. He wasn't like you got to remember like 2007. It's not like it's not like the candidates are calling you up wanting advice in their digital strategy, right? Like they're kind of like this is something we have to do. Like I couldn't get them to let us use social media because they were so worried about the comment section and all of that. The biggest thing is every time I mention Giuliani, I have to remind people that when I worked for him, he was considered America's mayor and barely a Republican. Um, because the Rudy Giuliani in 2007, seen through 2007 eyes versus seen through 2026 eyes is a very different Giuliani.
Such a different Giuliani. We could do a whole show on Rudy. We're not going to do that here, but we'll come at it in bits and pieces. But let me ask you one thing, because there's a fascinating moment in your book where you talk about thinking Rudy's going to fire you.
Yeah.
What was that all about?
So I had been asked by the comms director to push an unflattering story of Mitt Romney
Mm.
and to the bloggers. So like part of my job at the Rudy campaign was liaising with bloggers, which is like the precursor to the influencers of today, right? And so I don't feel really comfortable with it, but I'm being given a direct order. So I picked two bloggers that I think are pretty Giuliani friendly to send this to, so I could at least say I did what I was told. Well, it gets leaked to a reporter at the New York Sun. And then I'm actually the one that sees the email to our comms director being like, hey, I got this email that Katie Harbaugh was sending around. So I then get thrown underneath the bus with the mayor, being told that I went rogue. Thank God I got told to do it in a room full of people. So like I had backup that like this was not me just doing it. But I wasn't there to defend myself in front of the mayor. And I'm like, this is a man who told his wife he was divorcing her at a press conference. I like, I'm just a lowly staffer. He doesn't know me from Jane Doe. Like, if he gets this question on stage, I could see him being like, that person doesn't work for me anymore. And so I spent the entire debate still doing my job, taking down video clips, putting them up on YouTube. But I had all my stuff packed in a bag, ready to grab if he fired me on that spot and needed to leave. And I remember having to call my parents up, being like, so listen, this might happen. If it does and the phone starts ringing off the hook, I'm going to get in touch with you in this way. Like around what was happening. Thank God it didn't happen, but like, it was a harrowing 2 hours of me waiting to see if he got the question.
Man, what an opportunity slash challenge I can only imagine as a young staffer in a presidential field. Yeah.
And you're not trained for that, right? Like you're not like there's no support. I was transferring to another team. Like the boss was trying to be as supportive as possible, but like it's not his decision. If the mayor decides he's firing me, you're fired. But like campaigns are not known for a place with HR or like mental support or therapy or anything like that. It's sort of like this is what comes with the gig. And so if you get fired, you get fired, and then you'll figure it out from there.
I mean, just for listeners as well, we're talking about this is the 2008 Republican presidential campaign. So it's still 8 years before Trump is, famous for saying you're fired, not on The Apprentice, but, he was doing this in his campaigns. But it would have been pretty novel to be fired in '08 on TV live, I think, all things considered, right? You
Yeah,
point out, yeah. So it's a very different world than where we live today, where Trump is firing people left and right on in any cabinet meeting at any moment in time.
exactly.
I mean, it's so different, but it's so fascinating. We get this amazing look into where we are today by looking backwards. So I want to talk about Macaca, Demon Sheep, those early virality moments and how people communicated and why those went viral the way they did
Yeah.
and how on earth that got us to where we are today. I know that could be a whole dissertation, but when you think of Macaca and Demon Sheep, what do you think of now?
Yeah, so for people who might not remember, so 2006 or no, it was 2005, right?
It was the
No, it was
sixth
yeah,
campaign,
summer
I think.
'06, summer
Yeah.
'06, sorry. So, YouTube is about a year and change old, and I'm struggling to get any politicians to really they still think the internet is people in their basements, like, they're kinda like, "Maybe we need to do it, but what is this thing?" Right? And Senator George Allen of Virginia, who was considered a potential presidential candidate for '08, um, opposition campaigns would have what are called trackers. So you would go to your opponent's every single rally, every single public appearance, and videotape them in hoping that they will say something stupid so that you can then spread that around and use it for campaign commercials, whatever it might be. So George Allen calls one of his trackers a slur, macaca. And the opposition campaign puts it on YouTube. Like, I think they tried to send it around to the press too, and it just didn't get that much pickup, but it gets online and it goes viral. And it basically destroys his career, which is wild because that wouldn't happen today. Right? Like
You can
it
say
would have
anything
made
now. You can
you could
say
say
whatever you
anything now.
want.
But back then it was a big deal and it
Yeah.
tanked his presidential aspirations, all these things. So I start getting calls now from staffers, from campaign operatives, et cetera, being like, how do I make sure that doesn't happen to me or I make it happen to my opponent? Right? Like, and then my problem is everyone wants everything to go viral. And I used to have one of those Staples easy buttons on my desk. And anytime somebody be like, make it viral, I just hit the easy button and be like, all right, done. Right. Um, but what it was doing and started a series of over the next, I would say 5 to 6 years. I mean, it continues to this day, but it was pretty novel at the time. Were these parody web videos? Were these web videos that can't like the guys who make the TV commercials and stuff like that? They're like, okay, I can make these longer. It doesn't have to be a 30-second ad. I would get press clip, the press would cover it. So you get earned media for free, all of this stuff. And so during the 2010, Carly Fiorina, who is a former Hewlett Packard executive, was running for California Senate. And Fred Davis, who was her ad guy, who's known for being kind of eccentric, does this ad against her Republican primary opponent, Tom Campbell, about being a rhino, right? Basically, Republican in name only. And it was about like fiscal stuff. Anyways, it had him as a sheep, a demon sheep with red eyes. And it was like this guy in a sheep costume in a suit. Like, people should go watch it if you haven't.
There'll be a
It was
link
so
right there.
absurd. I actually dressed up as Demon Sheep a couple years ago for my brother's party when he did a campaign party. I have a picture of me dressed up at it, and people still remember it. But like that was the power of that, right? Like we are still talking about Demon Sheep 16 years later. Like that says something about like the memory and the staying power of that. And while it alone did not help Carly win that primary, her poll numbers certainly started going up after that. And so it was definitely an example of campaigns being like, okay, we can use this internet thing to help us get our message out in unique ways.
And you open up a Pandora's box. Talk about
Yeah.
what the heck. Did you see it coming?
No, I mean, no. I mean, in hindsight, like at the time, like when you're working on a campaign, your only goal is winning, right? Like and what you're trying to do is you assume that more is better. So the more views, the more clicks, the more money, all of that. And so it's like the more attention, all of those types of things. So it's like, oh, if I'm seeing something that's getting all of those things, because the thing with the internet too is we can now track so much more. You'd put a TV commercial up and you'd have to run a poll to know how much it like moved people. Now you could do all this A/B testing, you could try all these different things and then decide what you're going to put money behind. But like so for me it was just like this is working, it's helping us win. We're getting attention, that seems to be good. I wasn't thinking about the fact that like, oh, the more you do this and it's the more extreme things that are going to get the more attention. And it's like slowly over. This is the interesting thing about writing the book is you can see the erosion happening. You don't necessarily know it's happening in the moment, but I'm like, oh, wait, if I go back to 2000, the shoreline was way over there. And now it's here. And I
Yeah.
just didn't realize because I was backing up a centimeter at a time
Mhm.
as it was happening. So, I mean, that's one of the things I one of the reasons I wanted to write about the book too is I feel like a lot of people don't even go back to the Obama years, let alone the early 2000s, when thinking about how we got to this point. And now we're at this beginning point of the AI age, and I'm worried that we're having the same short-term visioning
Mhm.
and not necessarily thinking about what does this look like 15, 20 years from now.
Hmm. I want to get to that in a little bit because you have a fascinating moment in your career where you're starting to think about 2024 and 2019. But let's save that for a minute. Let's back up a little bit to your arrival at Facebook. You come in as the Republican working across from a Democrat. Every single social media company in this era, as a reporter covering this, would staff their teams.
Yep.
Google, Microsoft, you name it. They brought in Republican and Democratic uh, operatives, people who worked in the White Houses and on Capitol Hill. So you come in, and one of those early moments. This is again for folks listening is like um, Facebook is just starting to become part of the conversation. Presidential candidates are starting to show up, but Eric Cantor, Kevin McCarthy, Paul Ryan, these are the young guns in Republican politics. I don't think yet. Actually, Cantor's still the leader, and McCarthy and Ryan are
They
not
were called the
even.
Young Guns then. Like, it was that was part of the reason we had all 3 of them was that was what they just couldn't kind of build that.
And that gives Republicans and Facebook a connection that's really important, setting the stage for what's going to come over the next 10 years or even more. But talk to us about why that was such an important moment to have those Republicans come to California.
Yeah, I mean, it was so this was also the era too where you were politicians. So Obama had won, right? He had done '08. We didn't have the 2012 election yet. We were like in the lead up to it. Um, and politicians were falling over themselves to look innovative. So they loved to come to campus and just do tours. They would love to say do a photo op, be like, look at me, I'm at these cool tech companies. In April of 2011, well, actually go back to November 2010, President Bush actually came and did a Q&A, but it was not like because the employee base was so liberal, like I don't think it was live streamed. I think it was just a Q&A for employees. But then Obama as president, they wanted him to come to campus and Mark did a Q&A with him. It was live streamed and it was, it was perfect because for the company it's you're getting FaceTime with the president, and the president's like, this is my thing. I'm the tech guy. I'm cool. Let's do this. Let's do this conversation. Well, there's nothing politicians have more of than FOMO, especially when they see the other side doing something and getting a lot of positive press for it. And we wanted to be careful of not because again, building relationships on the Hill, you can't be seen as just favoring one side over the other. And so at the time, there was a gentleman by the name of Matt Lira who was working for Eric Cantor, and they were very digital forward. They were building apps. We did our first congressional hackathon. There was a lot of stuff that they were doing, and they were really wanting to modernize Congress and how they were communicating and all of that. And so Matt and I came up with the idea to pitch this to the company and for them to pitch it to the members that they would come in and do their own Q&A and live stream. And so Cheryl ended up doing the fireside chat with them. They did a meeting with Mark, all of that. But it really, again, all of these things are sort of proof points for these folks that it can be done in a way that doesn't have to be viewed as like dangerous or like risky for them. And they get a lot of good press out of it.
Hmm. You start traveling around the world a lot during this period too. As I'm reading the book, it starts to occur to me. I mean, it's 5 o'clock somewhere. It's always 5 o'clock. So Facebook never stops.
Yeah.
People are always kind of posting. So I guess first off, like, what is it like working at a company where people are using your stuff all the time and it's probably peaking at different places at different places? How do you even get your head around working at a company, of that caliber and it's expanding at massive scale?
It was wild. So I remember going around and asking a bunch of folks when I started doing the international stuff. I was like, what's the best way for me to keep track of everything happening in the world? Like basically. And the biggest piece of advice that I would still give people is they were like, read The Economist. At bare minimum, read that front section that they have. That's kind of their digest section. They were like, that will start to help you at least like have a lay of the land of what's happening. But then it was really traveling to these places that helped me to understand their cultures and all of that. As a company, so we have our international headquarters is in Dublin. There's another big offices in Singapore, in Hyderabad. So you had teams that were on call. They were working 24/7, and they would basically do handoffs as the time zones went. And then for me, what I ended up having to do was we had this thing called banana phone. So people would be on call. So that way, if something happened in the middle of the night, you knew who you could call to like, but it was actually a big problem in the beginning because we might wake up in America and the poor people in Asia and Europe may have been waiting 6, 8 hours to understand if they could take something down or not, or if something was violating. And for me to be able to sleep, I learned that there's this setting on your phone called VIP. And so I could have do not disturb, but like if somebody like Joel called me, it would go through no matter what, because otherwise my phone was just pinging constantly. And I was like, I can't sleep because the vibrations just keep going.
In my search there for that other thing, I found I think this is my original iPhone, 32 gigabytes. This is pretty damn small, but
Wow.
this thing's probably worse. But I'm imagining you're just typing away on this just as you're talking. What was the most unusual foreign government request? I know I was reading through the book as there's a number of examples, but what are some of the unusual things you got asked?
We had one, the New Zealand Election Commission wanted us to change the color of Facebook to orange because blue was the color of one of the political parties. We didn't do that. Um, we had ones that because most countries have a blackout period ahead of their election, so it's usually anywhere from 24 to 72 hours where the press can't talk about the election, the candidates can't campaign. It's meant to be a quiet period for voters to like think and make their final decision. Well, that was really hard to enforce on a social media platform that nobody could talk about that or anything. And so we also had some governments that wanted us to like, they were like, can you just make it so nobody can post on Facebook for 3 days in our country? And it was like, no, we, not really. Well, and it was also hard too because there weren't, there just weren't the laws weren't written for the social media and internet era, and so they're trying to shoehorn that into it for the internet, and so there were a lot of conversations around what that might look like and what was or was not doable.
Which is a perfect hinge into 2016 because, as we know now, Russian ad payments are being made on Facebook at a large enough level to prompt major changes to at least the conversation in America about what our political leadership would look like. And obviously, my entire post 2016 career is spent covering the Mueller investigation, everything that follows. But talk to me and talk to my readers about how this starts to play out in your world and when you learn
Yeah.
about this and you didn't know about it in 2016 while it's happening. But what's going on inside Facebook in this period?
So the first date, I will say, it was December 2015. Trump does a post about how if he becomes president, he's going to do a Muslim ban. And it was against our community standards to talk about banning people of any protected class, of which religion is one. And so that was the first time Trump really like pushed the boundaries of our community standards. And there was a lot of discussion because we knew how precedent setting it would be to take down content from the potential nominee for president. I mean, he was ahead in the polls, all that kind of stuff. We ended up leaving it up because, and this is where the newsworthiness standard, it didn't come from that. It came from something else, but that's where it really started to come into play for politics. Then you have the Philippines election on May 9th, 2016, where Maria Ressa, who's now a Nobel Peace Prize winner, journalist, was being harassed by Rodrigo Duterte's people and supporters, and they were using Facebook in which to do that. And Maria was finding this stuff and telling us, but we had no policies. We didn't have a container in which to really analyze that and say something was against the rules or not. And so Philippines was definitely ground zero for this. That same day of their election, this thing called trending topics happened, which was a controversy where a Facebook contractor accused the company of suppressing conservative content in this trending topics thing. People might remember that from Twitter. Like you could see like what people were talking about the most. So Facebook was what it does best, copying that in there. And so we had to do this big meeting of all these conservatives from Tucker Carlson to Jim DeMint, all of those folks to try to like be like, no, 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 we're not, this is not what's happening, etc. That's actually what causes Facebook to get rid of its own internal like editorial team and fact checkers around all of this. A month later, Brexit happens, which is a surprise election there too. Most people thought that they were going to vote to stay. Now, like, and Trump's getting ahead in the polls, and at least for Republicans, right? And becomes the nominee. There's the Economist story in September about post-truth politics, and I'm sitting here thinking like this is going to be a big problem in Europe in 2017 for their elections. But then, like, and then also the month in October, so the Access Hollywood tape had already come out. Trump was being abandoned by all these Republican, like, elected officials. Everyone thinks Hillary has this in the bag. Like, every conventional political thing said Hillary should win that election. But I'm starting to see a couple things that are making me go, huh. One of which is that on the third debate, Trump's the first candidate ever to buy the live stream. So buy the same pool feed that all the press and everyone can, does his own pre and post programming. And I notice he has more viewers on his live stream of the debate than ABC News does. And we as Facebook are pointing on our homepage people to the ABC stream. And I'm like, huh, that's like, it's just, I'm like, that's a lot of people that are watching this on his page. And then I started paying more attention to how many viewers he was getting on all of his rallies. He had some intern with an iPhone, nothing fancy, just live streaming every single rally. And they were getting a couple million views every single time. And so, but Trump wins, right? And it was a huge shock to the system. And now people are like, how did this happen? How did we miss this?
And let me
What
just
is
stop
that?
you there. Let me stop you right there because
Yeah.
Hillary purposely doesn't use Facebook at the very end too, which is where that contrast is so pronounced. Explain why Hillary didn't, if you know, and,
Yeah.
and keep going with where you're going to.
Well, and this is one of the challenges, right? So we were like inside of Facebook, we were like, we're going to offer the same thing to all the candidates, right? So we had the same tools, we offered the same level of support, and we were like, we can offer it. It's up to them to take it or not. Trump's team was like, had us down in San Antonio, not me, but like our teams down in San Antonio. They were they were willing to turn on a dime of trying something new, etc. Whereas the Clinton team was very much like, don't call us, we'll call you. We know what we're doing. We did the Obama campaign. We know what we're doing. Thank you very much. We don't need your help. And so then then Trump is like, when he wins, he's like, I won because of Facebook. He said, I won because of Facebook. Which in 2012, we were like throwing parties. Like that was fantastic when Obama's saying it. Now that's a scarlet letter. Now that is a really, like, it is just a big reputational crisis for the company around all of that.
Mhm. And it's fascinating because I was at the first debate in 2016, and Trump had a TV studio built there in St. Louis at the debate. It
Yep.
was sort of like the Trump TV station, and they were using it. I remember it's all the same people, or there was a good number of the same people. Jeff Sessions, I remember being there, Boris being there.
Yep.
But the whole talk and the conversation, if Trump had lost the election in 16, was he's going to launch his own new media company and his own TV station. And so it's fascinating to contemplate how he sort of, instead does what he does to launch himself the way he does. And obviously, when he loses the White House in 2020, what does he do? He launches a media company immediately, Truth Social and so many others. Let me take you, let's jump a little bit ahead because you just mentioned the celebrating of Facebook, but then you end up with Joe Biden as president, where he says Facebook is killing people around COVID and misinformation. And that comment becomes evidence in the Supreme Court case about government pressure on platforms and the First Amendment. What's the difference, as you now look, between containing information from dark fringe spaces, which is what we were talking about in the everywhere up to 2014, 15, 16, but now when you have this kind of blast coming at you from a White House, how do you handle that when it's coming from the actual government?
So when that line happened, I was out of Facebook for a couple of months because that was summer of 21. But while I was inside the company, we would have multiple phone calls where we were getting yelled at by people on Biden's team. And also the DNC, like they had now built up full teams that they were doing their own investigations. And they'd be like, we think this is misinfo. We think this is Russian. We think this is this. You guys should be taking this stuff down. And would get very angry at us if we pushed back and said, we're not seeing what you're seeing, or, you know, all sorts of different things. And like, one of my favorite things to do with people is like, if everybody thinks that we could all agree on content moderation, like we would not have these problems. Like everybody has differing views of like where the line should be drawn, etc. But like now, like the company, it's hard to them and all the tech companies are really having to recalibrate of like normally this stuff would happen behind closed doors. And now both Trump and then Biden, now they're coming at you like in public and going after you. And that creates like that too, like you can see it adds to the eroding of trust in these companies, in these tech CEOs, et cetera, and just institutions overall, I think.
Hmm. And it's definitely kind of become a snake eating the tail concept in a lot of ways, too.
Yeah, absolutely.
So let's jump ahead, or actually let's go back a little bit first. Talking about Facebook and the role that it plays in society in that 2016 election. I wrote a story I was telling you before we came on. In 2014, I write this piece for Politico about how it's, families are breaking apart. And I spotlighted a Democratic operative named Brent Blackby, who's out in California. He was fighting with his uncle on Facebook, just about, Trump versus Hillary. And it was a nasty conversation. And you could find millions of those on Facebook in the 2014-15 period. Fast forward, I think it was like a year later, Sprint actually does a commercial about Brent Blackaby and sort of talks about him and his uncle and how they are trying to come together in their communication. But it certainly comes to a point where, and you write about it in your book, there's a dividing line that starts to happen. And it happens personally for you when Brett Kavanaugh is being confirmed in the United States Senate to be a Supreme Court justice. Standing behind Brett Kavanaugh is Joel Kaplan. For people who don't know who Joel Kaplan is, he worked in the George W. Bush White House way back in the day. I'm sure you guys were close way back in the day, but he knew Brett Kavanaugh because Brett Kavanaugh was a judge in the Bush White House. He was standing behind Kavanaugh, supporting him. The country was very divided in this moment, and it played out in your offices at Facebook. Can you talk a little bit about how that played out? And I mean,
Yeah.
that is a dividing moment, right? It's sort of in your face in terms of, are you for or against?
Well, and excuse me, I actually didn't know Joel till he joined Facebook because I was on more the RNC side. And again, I'm about 10 years younger, so I'm a little bit more junior. But like Joel's my boss throughout this entire time. Like we go through a lot together. Like he's I will continue to say one of the best bosses I ever had, gave me a lot of opportunities. And when this happened, so the other thing too is like Facebook talked a lot about how Facebook, it was like your family, right? Like, and a lot of people expected folks to put Facebook first. Like you were meant to, like they gave you everything. So you never had to leave the campus, right? And you were working 24/7. So you're seeing your coworkers oftentimes a lot more than your own family and friends. So when Joel stands behind Kavanaugh and one of his friends, and he's like, I'm choosing supporting my friend, now I'm moose hunting. I'm in the middle of nowhere, Canada. And I start getting Facebook messages from folks about like, what do you think of this? Do you approve of what Joel did? Are you supporting Joel still? Like all of these types of things. And I don't even have a chance. Like I haven't talked to Joel. I don't know why he did this or not. But very quickly, people were wanting to know they wanted to know if I was with them or not. And it was a really tough thing to navigate because I felt like I didn't have I didn't feel in a spot to make I'm not Joel. I don't know what he's taking into account with all of this. And it was just really stark for me that it was like this, like, you got to tell us right now. You got to have a hot take and I need to know where you're at because that's going to help me judge where you are versus like holding room for nuance. And it was really tough. It was just a really tough time.
Hmm. So you're a journalism major. I'm curious, as I'm reading your book, you cite Politico and a lot of news organizations throughout, and really, I think, understand the media and the press. But talk to me from the inside. What does the press get wrong or right about the world that you've lived in? Why
Yeah.
cite Politico as much as you do throughout your book? And I think that's an interesting way because you've certainly seen the humanized aspects of what it's like inside of any of these rooms.
Yeah. Well, I think one is like the reason Politico a lot is they just covered this stuff a lot. And, like there's a lot more organizations that do this intersection of tech and politics, like Wired's doing it very well, The Information, a lot of these others. But like back when you were doing it, right? Like it was a very specialized beat and it wasn't one that necessarily mainstream news organizations were going to put a ton of time and effort behind. And when I was looking, especially for really early day stuff, it was really hard to find. Like we think things last on the internet forever. Turns out they don't. And a lot of things I could only find was through the press coverage that had happened of them around that. My biggest challenge when talking to the media is, especially when we were back in the days where you only had so many column inches that you could put something in, it's really hard to get into the nuance of that. Now, in fairness, from a company standpoint, we were not very helpful in explaining that nuance either. This is one of the reasons I wanted to write my newsletter and be talking more publicly about all of this when I left, because I do think it's important to kind of understand those trade offs and stuff. The other thing too, like I remember too, like when we did that election war room, and we had reporters in and we were showing it to them, and everyone's like, this is just, they're trying to do this to get a press story. This isn't actually something that I'm like, no, 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 this is a room. We have actual people in, we're doing it in. It was not just a boondoggle to try to get press stories, but it was really hard to get reporters to sort of understand that, or some of them to believe that, around that. I think the other thing too that's really hard is sort of understanding, especially reporters in the United States, how a company where 80% of their user base is outside the United States, how these things play out geopolitically and the pressures you're getting. And like the US is the exception versus the rule of how most of the world works. And so when you're trying to look at everything through a US lens, that becomes very challenging because we could not do that at the company.
Mm. Are there more countries in the world that will say to you, shut down Facebook 3 days before and then not, I guess, on that point?
I mean, most democratically elected countries would not do that, but we got a lot of pressure from especially after the Arab Spring happened. A lot more authoritarian countries and dictators were like, "Oh, we got to use this Facebook thing because we don't want to be toppled or anything like that happening." And so they were the ones. You see a lot of internet shutdowns in places like Africa, for instance, and other places that were always a challenge.
Hmm. Let's turn to leaving Facebook and the burnout. You wrote in your book, perhaps most painfully, I learned that companies don't love you back. Don't confuse martyrdom for resilience. The legacy of this particular chapter you're writing is the generation of people who went through the fire. I've built a whole publication here on the idea that journalism does love you, did love me back. Where does it leave you coming out of this?
So you said an important distinction there that I want to call out because I said a company does not love you back. And part of the reason I went out on my own is because I still very much care about elections, the internet, trust and safety, all of that work in the same way I think you feel about journalism. So I think this was one of the things that I had to come to a realization of, and I have to remind a lot of other people too. Even when like Doge was happening and the USAID and all of that stuff was being dismantled, they can fire you, they can close down your shop. They don't take your passion away for the work. And it might take a while for you to figure out how you're going to reconstitute that, and how you're going to do it, but like they can't just all of a sudden take that out of you. And I think that one of the things about these tech companies is you went in there and again, it was like your family, it was, all of this support. We're going to do all of this stuff for you. So it got really hard when you're like, "Oh wait, now they don't want me anymore." Right? And it was like, "Wait, I thought that this was supposed to be, you wanted me here forever and like all of this stuff." So it was just kind of a harsh reality that in all honesty was very naive of going into it, but like you were also kind of like I was like, I was given so many opportunities through them and I had given a decade of my life to this company and you kind of expected a little bit more back in return for that and didn't exactly happen.
Hmm. You wrote, my hands shaking at a conference room, not being able to lift a fork. Burnout isn't only exhaustion, This one set well with me. It's alienation from your own instincts. What do you wish you'd known earlier? What would you tell someone who's in that place right now?
Um, a couple of things. One is I I frankly, if I should have left in 2019. I should have left sooner. I should have had more trust that there was life after Facebook, that there was more that I could do stuff from the outside as well, and that it's not a failure if things are no longer a fit anymore. I tell that to like I kind of, I was so much thinking that like I have to figure out how to make this work because if I don't, I'm a failure. There's something wrong with me versus the company's values have changed, how they're thinking about it has changed, et cetera. I also wish like no job is worth your health. No job is worth your health. Carte blanche. And I should have I wish I had sought out therapy sooner. I wish I had thought through what types of healthy coping mechanisms I needed in which to go through all of this. And really thinking about what that was. I think that's a very individual thing for all of us. And it's something I worked on a lot leaving Facebook of what that looks like for me. That I wish, like, if I could go back to 2016 me, I'd be like, stay for a while. Like, this is really important work. You're going to learn a ton, but also think about how you keep yourself healthy throughout.
Hmm. We're going to talk about January 6th now a little bit. A seed took root one night at a Ritz Carlton bar in January 2020. You wrote in your book, say, on January 6th, 2021, I watched the Capitol fall briefly into the hands of protesters. The two institutions that shaped my life, the Republican Party and Facebook, had become unrecognizable. Walk me through the night of January 6th for you, if you can. Talk about
Yeah.
starting over and leaving institutions.
So I got pulled off the election work at Facebook in fall of 2019. And I was going to quit in January 2020. So this is a year before January 6th, right? COVID hasn't hit yet. Like COVID's at the very beginning. But I'm trying to figure out what my next role. I went back into public policy. Joel was like, "Don't quit. Like we'll figure something out." But I had to figure out what my next act was going to be, if you will. And I realized all the a historic year of elections happening in 2024. And I'm like, that's what I want to work towards. Like, and, but then COVID hit, the world turns upside down. So I spend that year thinking through and I was turning 40 in November 2020, 10 years at the company. I was like, if there was going to be a time to leave, it's going to be after that. Excuse me. So, um, January, and I'm still like there every day. Like one day I'd be like, maybe I can stick it out at Facebook. The next day is like, no, I gotta leave. Like I was really oscillating back and forth. So I'm in my home office that I had created during COVID because we're all working from home. And I've got habit from my early RNC days. I've got CNN on mute on the background so that I can, see what's happening in the world. And I also have TweetDeck up. So at the time, like my Twitter was so well curated and I had Twitter lists of reporters and, operatives, like all those folks. I start seeing on Twitter that the protesters are starting to march towards the Capitol. And then you see it on TV very quickly. And so you're watching this unfold and you're just like, I'm worried about my staffers that are around the Capitol area. I've got friends who work for these members that are like, I'm worried about their safety and what is happening. We're trying to figure out like everyone's just trying to figure out what's happening. And it was that I can't remember, like, I just remember sitting there being like, I'm sitting here trying to figure out whether or not I stay at Facebook. Like, we're like, what how did we get to this point? And also this party that I used to work for too, like these values are totally different than the ones that when I first joined joined working for Republicans back in the early 2000s for. And there was just this realization, there was something about it where it was like, I need to build my own thing. I don't fit in a box anymore. I don't have a home. And I was okay with that, but like it was a really tough it was a tough time, but it was also a really eye-opening time about like, I was like, there's going to be a lot of aftermath here. And we need to I want to be a part of that solution of what that looks like because I can share a lot of what lessons learned from the inside. And if I wasn't going to be able to do that at the company, I wanted to do it outside the company.
And in your book, you use the term, you use the fish, you have a fish story. I also had a fish story in terms of getting eaten up, working in media companies where one company eats another company. In your context, you write about, do you want to be a big fish in a small pond or a small fish in a big one? And now here you are, independent on Substack. What's it been like going independent, realizing, I think you wrote in your book, you've forgotten your own voice and keeping that voice
Yeah.
now?
I love it so much. I love like it is tough, right? Like there are high highs, there are low lows. It's hard to know, like, and especially right now with AI, I feel like what I'm working on, like, the high level theme of tech and elections and politics still remains, but like what's underneath that changes like every month. I feel like sometimes or every 3 months around all of that. It has meant a lot to me that people find my writing helpful. I've realized like keeping my particular niche is something not many other people are writing about. So it's very helpful for me for building that audience for me and like and then having, and getting consulting contracts. Like my newsletter is one of the best marketing tools that I've been able to do, but I don't have to run what I say by anybody. So yes, I could probably use an editor sometimes, right? Like and stuff like that. But like it just allows me to have that opinion and kind of be thinking about and putting at least my perspective out there on everything that's happening. And it's brought me so much joy. I write for 5 years now. September is my 5 year anniversary, and I've written at least one week every week for those 5 years. To now, it's such a habit that like if I don't write once a week, I feel like it feels so weird. But and I'm really excited to see where it goes. Right, like there's so many more people now that have Substacks. When I started it 5 years ago, it was still a very new company. So I've talked to so many people about starting them. One of the things I hope too is, you talk a lot about stories, right? And telling stories. And I think in our line of work and also in the trust and safety world, being public and telling your story puts a target on your back. And a lot of people are nervous about telling their stories and telling what happened. And so one of the things I'm hoping to do with this book, with my newsletter, with everything I'm doing, is showing people at least one way you can think about going about it. It may not be the exact way you want to go about it, but I'm just hoping to, show them that there might be a path for that.
Yeah, you write in the book, it's tempting to cast Mark Zuckerberg, Sheryl Sandberg, Joel Kaplan, or anyone else as a villain, that their humanity doesn't excuse the impact of their choices, and they had to make very tough choices. How do you hold both of those at once now as a writer yourself? What do you want to say to people who want to get into this work now when just being in this work is enough to draw fire? As you said, you've
Yeah.
experienced it yourself.
And and listen, I know that I've built up a thick skin over the last 25 years with everything that I have sort of gone through, which frankly I think has given me more freedom to think about all of this. But I tell people like it doesn't like maybe it's LinkedIn, maybe it's a Substack, maybe maybe it's a podcast for you, maybe it's just an email newsletter you're sending to some of your friends and it's not even available on the internet. But I do think more and more people having their own brands. I know that can be sometimes cringe, but we all do have our own brand, our own reputation. But having that thought leadership is important, but it doesn't have to like think through what way works best for you. And also, you don't have to be doing super spicy hot takes right away. Sometimes, like, I think people forget that they have their own expertise that others don't know about. And there can be ways to think about dipping your toe in the water to at least get used to it before you start doing things that maybe put bigger targets on your back.
Mm. Are you cringing at the thought of writing about 2028 and the presidential debates to come?
I'm actually this is where I'm just so weird. I'm actually so excited about it. Like, listen, I think like I think what 2028 is going to be to AI, what 2012 was for data and digital. Like you think about the Obama '08 election, was very beginning social media. We were all still trying to figure it out. Um, that's what 2024 was for AI and campaigns. And 4 years later, you're just going to see a complete sea change in everything from how people consume information, create information, how they engage with the candidates, all those types of things. And again, there's so many lessons we can learn from the social media era as we're trying to figure that out. And now I get to better help shape that. Like I have a better, I think like I'm doing polling, I'm interviewing campaign staffers about how they're doing stuff that's ending up getting quoted in the New York Times, right? Like it's a real I don't take it for granted and I take the responsibility really seriously around doing it. And I think we have to have these conversations out in the open, because otherwise I don't want us to be surprised again when when something happens and we were like, where did that come from? Why did that come out of left field? I don't want that to happen again.
Hmm. Besides asking for help finding their passwords, what's one question your friends and family ask you the most about Facebook?
Oh my God. There used to be, I remember weddings where everybody went around and gave me their Facebook grievance. And like my joke would be, hang on, let me get Mark on the phone for you. To try to a lot of people want to know what Mark and Cheryl were like, as people. A lot of folks, I don't get it as much anymore. A lot of folks, it's like it's my account's been taken down. Like people are still using Facebook a lot. It's still used by a lot of small businesses, et cetera. So for the most part, a lot of what I get now is people being like, something's wrong. Do you still know somebody there that can help me figure out like how I get this restored?
Hmm. What is Mark and Cheryl like? Gotta ask it.
So I don't I knew Cheryl a little bit better. Like, let's be honest, I was not in meetings with them every day, all that kind of stuff. With Mark, back in the day when he did the weekly Q&As, I used to say that like I would do any job at Facebook, like sweep the floors, make me do whatever it is, because hearing him talk about how he was thinking about things in a 10-year time span was just so different than how I was hearing other people think about it, that it was really, and to this day, I tell people listen to his earnings calls because that's the closest thing I can get to what he's thinking about. And like sometimes he's wrong. Like, yeah, the metaverse didn't happen yet, but like a lot of times these things he does them and they happen. And so it's really important for knowing that. So like he just has this ability of kind of like looking ahead in a way that I haven't seen from a lot of people. But he's also a human. Like he is and he's not normal. He doesn't have a normal life, but he is a human. And Cheryl too, I think, um, I will never forget the opportunity she gave me. And I may disagree with her right now on some of the ways that she's thinking about women in the workplace and stuff like that. But like, this is another woman who was ahead of her time and helping to figure these things out, and did a lot for women in the workplace that unfortunately you're seeing rolled back.
I've got to ask you about imposter syndrome because it's a part of your book. Talk about
Yeah.
that a little bit. What did you learn about imposter syndrome in your career?
So I think the biggest thing I learned is we all have imposter syndrome. Like, I mean, I think Oprah is the only person I heard who said she doesn't have imposter syndrome, which fine, you're Oprah. You don't need to have it. But I think we always have this view that like, oh, there's somebody. Lindsey Graham had this great quote, right? That they were putting around when after he passed away, about how when he was in Congress, he kept looking for the they who knew what was going on, the they who were in charge, the they who could figure out like what was happening. And then he got to the Senate and thought it was the Senate. Then he thought it was the White House, and he realized there's no they, there's a we. And I think that's also like what I very much learned about imposter syndrome, is that like we think that and I worry about this too. This is why on my LinkedIn and my newsletter, I try to talk about my failures just as much as the things going well, because I don't want anybody looking at this thinking like, oh, Katie has it all figured out, she doesn't have imposter syndrome. Like, no, I still very much have, worry about, am I making the right decisions or not? Like, I kept waiting for people to be like, oh, no, you're not supposed to be here. Sorry, this was a 25-year mistake. Like, go back where you belong. And that's just not going to happen. And so it's just kind of like, I don't let it paralyze you.
Yeah, there is no watch that you get at the end of the career, even though there might have been a watch back in the day that they gave you at the end, but you're so spot on. I got two final questions I ask everybody. Um, what's one thing in your career and in your writing career and your storytelling career that you've carried with you the whole way through?
Oh, that is a really good question. Um, I had thought about it till you just asked that question, but we were just talking about the humanity around everything. And I think whether it is writing a breaking story about a fire on campus when I was at UW Madison, to like what I'm writing now, like at the end of the day, we're humans behind all of this. And I think that that's an important thing to remember.
And you brought up journalism, Katie. I'd be curious to know whether journalism, Katie, believes that journalism has loved her back as the finale here.
Oh, 100%. Like, I tell my journalist, I'm still on the board of the Center for Journalism Ethics at UW-Madison, and I tell my journalism teacher all the time, like, the things I learned in J school around taking, like, this is what I think I'm able to do with my newsletter, take really complicated topics that are happening really fast and distill it down in a way that like anybody can kind of understand and to help connect those dots. And that was something that journalism gave me. And while I may not have taken the traditional journalist path, it's always been a part of me throughout my career.
Mm. You spent 25 years in rooms most of us never get to see into. I spent some of those same years standing outside them trying to describe what was happening, desperate for folks like you to call me back based on what leaked out. It feels like we've been covering the same story from opposite sides of the glass the whole time. Katie, thank you for finally letting me in the room. Your book, Disrupting Politics, published by Indigo River Publishing and distributed by Simon and Schuster, is out October 6th. Please go get it. Katie, thanks for being on the Love Journalism Show.
Thanks for having me.